Volcanoes are scattered across the planet. About 1,500 active volcanoes can be found across the world, though countless others are on the ocean floor. Most volcanoes, whether on land or underwater, are located where tectonic plates meet. In fact, the Ring of Fire, a path that traces the boundaries between several tectonic plates around the Pacific Ocean, contains about 75% of the planet's volcanoes. There are several types of volcanoes, primarily classified by shape and size. Major types include stratovolcanoes, which often appear as tall steep mountains, shield volcanoes, which are flatter and dome-shaped, calderas, which are large depressions in the ground, and mid-ocean ridges, which are underwater chains of volcanic mountains. No matter their shape or size, all volcanoes emit gas and molten rock. The journey of these emissions begins deep underground in the Earth's core. The core, which can burn as hot as the surface of the sun, transfers its heat to the surrounding rocky mantle. In doing so, the heat melts some of the rock. This molten rock, or magma, is lighter than the surrounding solid rock layer, so it rises through the mantle. The magma then escapes through vents in the Earth's crust, causing volcanic eruptions. Dyslexia is a learning disorder. The reader has difficulty linking a language's proper speech sounds to letters and words. The brain struggles to learn how to automatically connect a word's pronunciation with what it looks like on the page. While scientists are still researching dyslexia's exact causes, the general agreement is that a dyslexic brain has trouble combining visual and sensory information. Consider the process that our brain has to go through to read, break down the visual word into its individual letters, convert those letters to sounds, then blend the sounds to create the whole spoken word. This process of breaking down and blending can take a long time for someone with dyslexia. But if you're dyslexic in English, you might not have that trouble in Chinese. That's because while English is an alphabetic language, using letters as the building blocks of words, Chinese is a logographic language. A logographic language uses written characters, instead of a combination of letters, to represent words. In order to know how a Chinese character is pronounced and what it means, you have to memorize the image of that character. What effect does this have on dyslexia? In English, dyslexic children often struggle with the phonics approach to reading, whereas their ability to read logographically may well be unimpaired. Since logographic Chinese requires its readers to know the whole word at once, the difficulties for a dyslexic English speaker might not be as severe if they try to read in Chinese. In one experiment, the researchers had some participants watch a short video promoting water conservation. And in another experiment, they added a video explaining why recycled water might trigger disgust, even though all contaminants have been removed. And neither video had a strong effect on people's willingness to drink recycled water or to sign a petition supporting the practice. The messages did sort of make people more positively predisposed to recycled water, but it was not enough to get them to actually use recycled water more. It didn't actually translate to behaviors. In fact, viewing the video that directly addressed recycled water's ick factor was no more persuasive than the water conservation video alone, perhaps because dispassionate reason and logic only go so far. Disgust is such a powerful core reaction. It's such a powerful emotion that simply giving more information is not going to really be effective because disgust is not really a rational response. So a virus is something that you can't see by normal light microscopy. You need very advanced techniques for electron microscopy to see it. But that virus is not able to reproduce itself without a host, and us as human beings are made up of lots of different cell types, and we are interested in understanding at the molecular level how that virus infects the liver and why does it infect the liver and it doesn't infect the heart or it doesn't infect other tissues. As a consumer, you're probably consuming imports. If we have a trade war and we start slapping tariffs on all of those imports, the bill is going to be higher. If the world relies so much on trade, what is a trade war and why do countries get caught up in them in the first place? Financial markets swung wildly yesterday in frenzied trading market by further selling of equities and fears about an unraveling of the global carry trade. At the same time, trading in the European credit markets in London was exceptionally heavy as traders frantically reassessed their appetite for risk, prompting wild swings in the prices of the key derivatives. It was the third day of frenetic activity in the European credit markets, suggesting that equity market swings were prompting a wider repositioning of investors in a host of asset classes. For years, TV advertisements and print advertisements dominated the advertising industry. Yes, TV commercials and newspaper and magazine ads were expensive, but for most advertisers, the money they spent was worth it. People were watching television and reading newspapers and magazines, but times are changing. Television is still the biggest segment for advertisers, but that won't last for much longer. Instead, the internet will overtake both TV and print marketing very soon. There are several reasons for this. First is the internet growing popularity. Today, the number of people who surf the internet is enormous. In the 1980s, few people owned personal computers. Nowadays, most households have at least one PC, and more people are using the World Wide Web. Every year, people are also getting their news from the internet. That's making print newspapers and magazines less popular. People are even watching TV programs on the internet. So as you can see, there's a growing audience available to internet advertisers. Another important reason is cost making and airing. A television commercial can cost a huge amount of money for local TV, it might be thousands of dollars, but for national TV, it can cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. In some cases, advertisers spend millions of dollars to run 30-second commercials in highly rated TV shows or sports broadcasts, but it's much less expensive to advertise on the internet. Internet advertisements are typically cheap to make many times, they merely provide a link to a company's website. And they don't cost that much either. Some internet advertisements cost a few $100s or even less to place on another website. The most expensive ads rarely require more than several $1,000s. Finally, companies can advertise to specific groups on the internet. All sorts of people watch TV or read newspapers and magazines. So an advertisement for baby products might not appeal to most of the audience or readers. However, a company advertising baby products on the internet can buy ad space on websites that parents with babies often visit. This lets the advertisers get more value from its money. Host: So where does meditation fit into mindfulness? Interviewee: So mindfulness is often spoken of as the heart of Buddhist meditation. So it's a form of meditation that really is the cultivation of intimacy with awareness. We have to learn to enter the domain of awareness because so much of the time, we're living in distraction. And that was true for thousands of years. So we didn't have to wait for the iPhone to be distracted. But now we're distracted to an infinitely higher degree than ever before. And just on average, people check their phones about 260 times a day, just to check, not to answer the phone but to just check the phone to see whether there's anything interesting happening. So in all those 260 moments, society has some pretty typical stereotypes for introverts and extroverts. One is cuddled up with a book in bed and the other is out being the life of the party. But there's actually a big misunderstanding about what truly makes someone one or the other. Being introverted or extroverted isn't dictated by how you spend your free time. It all depends on how you recharge when you're feeling low. Introverts do it alone. Extroverts with others. How someone recharges may not seem like a huge deal, but it has some interesting impacts. One's social life, career, even internet usage can be affected. And these differences aren't just external. The brains of introverts and extroverts are actually surprisingly It's a now they know how many holes it takes to fill the Albert Hall situation. Because researchers have measured the actual blood alcohol level of fans leaving professional football and baseball games. And they found that 8% of all the spectators willing to take the breathalyzer exam were over the legal limit for driving. The work appears in the journal Alcoholism, Clinical and Experimental Research. The investigators managed to get breath samples from 362 fans exiting 13 different baseball games and 3 football games. 40% registered some level of alcohol on the meters. Fans under the age of 35 were 9 times more likely to be over the limit than older fans. Interrogators were 14 times more likely than other fans to be over the limit. Lead researcher Darren Erickson of the University of Minnesota points out that, if the 8% finding holds for the whole crowd, at the conclusion of an NFL game some 5,000 people over the limit could spill out into the streets and potentially behind the wheel. Remember, these results apply to those willing to be tested. So the true percentage of uncooperative inebriates may be higher. Companies spend billions on advertising every year. But they're not just pushing products, they're selling their brand's personality, too. Think, Red Bull. What comes to mind? Most people say things like speed, power, hyper, extreme. Well, a pair of scientists wanted to see if the energy drink's alleged qualities would influence people's performance in a race car video game, without sipping Red Bull. So they had 70 volunteers race cars with identical specs, but different paint jobs. 4 with the logo and colors of a drink, Guinness, Tropicana, Coca-Cola or Red Bull, and 1 car just plain green. The drivers clocked similar times with most of the cars. But behind the wheel of the Red Bull car, they actually drove more aggressively, scoring either incredibly fast race times, or their slowest, by driving recklessly and crashing. The study appears in the Journal of Consumer Psychology. Polled after the game, the players didn't realize the Red Bull image apparently influenced their driving. Which suggests marketing doesn't just influence a brand's personality. It could be shaping our personalities, too, without our even knowing it. Today we have a guest speaker who is visiting from Canada. Digital scanners can scan all kinds of materials provided they are in small pieces. You may not manage your time well without a reading list.